All right, we have a lot of people on the line. We are going to get started. Thank you again, everyone, for being on today's ETB Masterclass Optimizing the Economics of C&I Solar Plus Storage in California webinar. We're really excited about what we're going to be showing you in the next hour. This webinar came to be after our speaker, Adam Gurza. He's the VP of Biz Dev here at Energy Toolbase. He completed an analysis that took several months where he studied the economics of solar and storage projects on every single C&I rate tariff in California's IOUs, those of course being PG&E, SC, and SDG&E. This entire analysis that he's going to be showing you is that he's going to be presenting on was ran through our ETB developer platform. And the main goal was really just to identify the characteristics of the most attractive projects, which he's going to be going in depth into. It was a really time-consuming analysis, and we thought it would be really beneficial for you guys, for us to share our insights with you as you continue to venture into the C&I energy storage market in California. So the title ETB Masterclass is a new series we have launched that we hope will give you some really good in-depth insights and education into topics just like this one. While our team has typically done high-level educational webinars, this is definitely not a 101 style webinar. This is for experts. It's a quote-unquote graduate level webinar, as we like to call it, for solar and energy storage professionals. And this webinar is going to give you guys all the insights, like I said, that our team has gained through this analysis, and hopefully provide you some guidance for your storage project modeling. And our master classes are going to start out on ground level with webinars like this, but hopefully we'll be adding more content, maybe some classes, videos, and other things for you guys to have full access to. So be on the lookout for more announcements on that in the future. But there is going to be a lot packed into the next hour. So a few things that I want to mention before we get started. We'll be taking questions at the end of the webinar. My name is Tracy. I'm the marketing manager with Energy Toolbase, and I will be moderating that and looking out for those as we go along. You can type them into the chat box when you see a slide you have questions on. And following the webinar, we are going to be sending out the recording of this to everybody that registered, along with the slide deck that you're seeing today. We do have a full version of this analysis. It's going to have probably twice as many slides on it that we will be publishing hopefully in the next week or two, and that will go straight to your inbox as well. Once we have that published, we will send it to you. So with that, I'm going to pass things over to Adam. So take it away.
Thank you, Tracy. Hello, everyone. This is Adam. And yeah, thank you again for taking time out of your busy day to be here. As Tracy just mentioned, we're really excited to share this analysis. We started working on this back in November, put a lot of work into this, and I think we have a lot of really good insights to share. So without any further ado, let's jump in. Okay, so the study, really what it was a really deep dive look at bill savings and economics of solar plus storage projects in California. And I've got today's presentation organized into 5 sections. We're gonna do a deep dive just on the effect on savings of the rate tariff itself. We're gonna look pretty deeply at the contribution of savings, whether that comes from solar or storage respectively, across our different runs. We're gonna get pretty deep into rate switching effects and best practices, and also how when we're looking specifically at how much money energy storage saves, the makeup of that savings, how much is coming from energy and how much is coming from demand. And we're going to finish with looking at the effect of different load profiles on savings and project economics. So kind of the overarching questions we're attempting to answer here is, hopefully this guides us in identifying some of the best characteristics of really attractive solar plus storage deals here in California. We're also going to attempt to answer which deals are most advantageous for adding storage and kind of really thinking about the marginal impact that storage brings. And hopefully this kind of informs, as developers, where we should be focusing our time as you qualify, lots of different types of deals. Okay, so let's get into the data set. So we ran 20 different rates, as you can see in this table here. These are what we believe to be the most predominant C&I rates in the 3 IOU territories. You can see we have this table organized by small, medium, and large. I think as most folks are probably well aware, the way it works in California, and frankly, most of the country for that matter, is the customer gets assigned to a rate based on their max demand. So you can see we listed the eligibility and kind of where those demand values fall. And then one other thing I'll just quickly mention now that we're going to get deeply into later is this table here is organized by what we call rate pairs, which is this concept of like you have the default rate that you get assigned to, and then you generally have a rate switching option that you can voluntarily opt onto. So that's kind of how this is also organized here. Okay, on the load profile side, we selected and used 10 different load profiles to run all our simulations against. And the idea here was to pick a good cross-section of different types of customers. I'll mention this is all real-world data that we're using in the analysis. And you can see on the left-hand table, we have these load profiles sorted by load factor. I think most folks are familiar with load factor. It's actually a really simple formula. It's the average demand across all intervals divided over max demand, right? So it kind of tells us how spiky or peaky the customer's load profile is throughout the year. And you can see on the, if you're close to zero, that is the volatile kind of spiky, peaky customer, which in our data set, the example there is the church. And then on the other end of the spectrum is a very flat load profile, which translates to a very high load factor, which in our case is the data center. Okay, really quick level set on the assumptions we used across the study. Obviously, it was important to use a standardized set of assumptions across all of our runs, which we're summarizing here. And as everything we do at Energy Toolbase, we want to be really transparent about the inputs that went into the model. And the idea here was to really just use market rate assumptions. You know, try not to be too conservative, try not to be too aggressive. And this is what we came up with. I will quickly mention on the right-hand side here, the price curves. So we ran a really wide range of system sizes, both on solar and storage. We had the small customers were as low as 19 kW max annual demand. The largest customers were as high as 1500 kW max annual demand. So we obviously ran this across a really wide range of solar and storage system sizes. And we had to develop costing curves. Obviously, you know, larger systems are installed at a much lower average, you know, dollar per DC watt or dollar per kilowatt hour of storage capacity. So that's what we've summarized over there on the right, and we'll kind of get into the implications of this in just a minute. Okay, so from here, before we dive into the results, you know, you kind of get the idea. So we had all these different rates and we had all these different load profiles, and we effectively ran solar plus storage simulations across all those scenarios. One thing I want to quickly mention now on the energy storage control setting side, we ran this based on how all of the integrations on ETB developer are set up today, or in the range of where those are set today. So what that means is, you know, if you use any of our storage integrations in step 5, whether that's, you know, using Energy Toolbase's Acumen EMS controller or a third-party controller like STEM or Tesla or others, basically all of these runs were based on very similar control setting values that are used in those integrations. So the takeaway there is when we interpret the storage savings and storage economic results, these are intended to be real world, you know, directionally accurate of what we could expect to achieve in the field. One last disclaimer before I jump in and we really kind of start looking through results. This entire study with regards to storage, we're only looking at bill savings. Okay, so there's obviously lots of other values that storage brings, you know, namely resiliency and backup and, the possibility of, maybe also tapping grid services revenue streams. This study doesn't consider those. This is just strictly looking at the bill saving side of the equation. Okay, without any further ado, let us get into some of the results. Okay, I want to start here. Throughout the study over the last couple of months, we did step back several times and ask ourselves, what are the most important metrics we think there are to present, right? So what are we trying to compare here? And we came up with 3 that I think allow us to communicate what we want to say, and we're going to be using these throughout the presentation and also in the published version of the deck that Tracy mentioned we'll be going out within a week or 2. So IRR, I think everyone's familiar with this one. This is, our way for us to just compare the overall project economics of the deal. And this obviously includes every cash flow in the project. So we're looking at savings, we're looking at system cost, incentives, and all the other various assumptions that go into that model. This next one here, we came up with, and the whole idea here is we wanted to find a metric that allows us to say how good a rate schedule or how good a load profile is for saving money with solar and storage, right? But we needed to standardize that or normalize that for system size. So we have a common scale. So effectively, this is savings divided by the combined PV plus ESS power rating. This will make sense in a minute when we start kind of interpreting these results. And then this last one, I think actually most folks are already quite familiar with. This is just energy storage savings. So now we're just isolating how much money did the storage system save over capacity of storage. And we, as I think a lot of folks know, pretty prominently display this number in step 5 when you're running storage simulations in ETB Developer. I can say for myself, whenever I run a storage simulation, this is usually one of the first things I look at, just to get a rough indication of how much savings the storage system achieved. So those are the 3 metrics we're going to be using, and let's now kind of jump on in here. Okay, first chart. We, as you can see, have this organized again by kind of small, medium, and large. And what we're looking at here is the average of all the IRR average across all runs on a different rate schedule, right? So we kind of are starting to get an idea of like the different types of variance between rate schedules and just have a comparison to rank against on an IRR basis. Now, one of the shortcomings, I'll say, of this chart here is the fact that this data does get skewed by those pricing curves, right? Because again, we have a really wide range of system sizes here, some small ones and some large ones. The large ones are getting priced and installed at a much, much lower dollar per watt basis or dollar per kilowatt hour basis. So that does tend to skew the IRR, and it basically favors the larger systems. They're just going to naturally have more attractive IRRs because the cost in some cases is half as expensive compared to the small ones. So still a useful chart, but just kind of be mindful of that. Or anytime we're looking at IRR, that's going to show up in the data. Okay, so this one here is neat. So this then removes that from the equation. Now we've kind of really normalized this to say, hey, how good, how advantageous is a rate for saving money with solar plus storage? And we kind of have an apples to apples comparison here that, again, removes install pricing completely from the equation. And again, this was run across a wide range of customer types, ranging on like 20 kW max demand on the low end, all the way up to 1500 kW. But it does start to give us a comparative look at how good a rate is or not good for saving money with solar plus storage. And we will come back to this and really kind of unpack this further. Again, this is the average of all runs. And then one last chart just to kind of like level set, because we're going to be digging back into this later. And this one here is just isolating the savings from storage. Okay, by rate, again, average across all runs. And the question we're basically trying to answer here is, well, how good is that rate for saving money with storage, right? And you can see there's a pretty wide variance here. Looks like anywhere from maybe like $10 a kilowatt hour up to almost $100 per kilowatt hour of storage capacity. And we will be diving deeper into this and kind of making sense of why these are what they are. Okay, we're now going to, so maybe just stepping back, those first three charts is kind of like, the 10,000 foot view of this analysis. And now we're going to kind of start zooming in and answering some of these questions I queued up earlier in the deck. And we're going to start with, well, how much does solar and storage contribute respectively? So we actually already looked at this chart a second ago. And now the questions are, well, okay, well, what's the breakout here between solar and storage? How much do they each contribute to savings? And another way of asking this is, how good is the incremental bill savings opportunity from adding storage? Okay, so that takes us to this next chart, and we're now showing that breakout, blue versus orange, solar versus storage savings. And I got to make a huge disclaimer on this slide here. This is a very tricky one to try to answer or definitively answer, because obviously this is going to be highly, highly dependent on the solar and storage system sizes relative to one another, right? Like if you really wanted to size down a very small solar system and size up a really huge battery, yeah, you could probably get this to say, there's going to be a lot more orange than blue. And I am going to talk about kind of how we set up some of the sizing throughout the analysis in a minute. So we're not trying to make any definitive statements here about like, on this rate, this is, the contribution of savings. But there definitely are still some pretty interesting takeaways here. For one, you can definitely see there's a pretty wide variance on what that breakout is. On the far end, it's like we're talking like 98% of the savings comes from solar, 2% from storage on the one end. And on the other end of the spectrum, across all these averages, it's much more like maybe 60-40 or like 2/3, 1/3. So to take this a step further, and I think this is going to make a lot more sense now, let's zoom into a specific rate, and we're going to kind of zoom in on the PG&E B6 rate. Okay, so overall, compared to all the rates in the study, this is a very strong rate. This is a very strong rate. It's a top 3 or 4 rate for being able to save money with solar and storage. But as you can see there, it's really all about PV. So let's kind of unpack that one step further. And here's the 10 individual runs that went into making up that average we just looked at. And you can see pretty clearly here on all 10 of our runs, across all 10 of those load profiles, vast majority of the savings is coming from solar, at 95% on average, right? And let's kind of understand why. So just by looking at the PG&E B6 tariff, you'll pretty quickly make sense of why. Okay, so first, this is a non-demand charge rate. This is an energy charge only rate. As a quick side note, a lot of the small, quote unquote, small C&I rates are energy charge only rates. So you got to be a little careful when you're kind of comparing the small versus the medium and large, because they are, fundamentally different. In terms of the energy charges here, these are really, really high, right? We're ranging anywhere from maybe like 21 to 35 cents a kilowatt hour on this PG&E B6 rate. So those are rich. I mean, that's like residential territory. In some cases, probably even higher. So that's going to make PV look very, very strong, regardless of where the PV is producing. Right? We don't get a lot of PV in the 4 p.m. to 9 p.m. on peak category, but it kind of almost doesn't even matter, because like wherever PV produces here, we're probably going to be in the neighborhood of like in the mid 20s on the average value of solar. So that's rich. On the storage side of the equation, just looking at this table, you can see there's just really not much of an opportunity at all here. So in the summer, right, we have about a maybe 12-cent differential between the on-peak and the off-peak. Okay, keep in mind the summer on this schedule, it's a 4-month summer. And then you can see in the winters, there's 2 winters, but in both winters, there's virtually nothing. We're talking about a couple of cents of arbitrage differential in the winters, 8 months of the year. At a couple cents, I think most folks know this, it doesn't even make sense to cycle the battery and try to do arbitrage. You probably didn't see it earlier, but on my assumption slide, we did state that we ran all of these runs at a 90% round trip efficiency. Okay, so even at and that's pretty aggressive, right? Even at a 90% round trip efficiency, when you have a couple cent differential here, you would literally barely be breaking even net of round trip efficiency loss. So again, takeaway here, really, really good rate overall. It's all about solar, and there's just no opportunity for storage. And frankly, I don't think you're going to be selling storage on this rate unless that customer really is motivated to have, maybe backup or resiliency or some other value. Okay, let me keep moving on. I'm kind of keeping an eye on the clock. I've got a lot of super important material still to get through, so let me keep moving here. And I want to switch gears and talk about rate switching. Okay, so this is probably one of the most important topics that when we started on this study a couple months ago that we really wanted to go deep on and understand, within the context of solar plus storage projects. And I think we already knew and had some kind of ideas around this, but we, hadn't yet maybe studied this in a really systematic way, which we're doing here. One really quick primer slide on rate switching. I imagine most folks on this call kind of understand this concept pretty well, but just very briefly, basically what this is, in all 3 IOU territories, there are quote unquote solar friendly rate options that a customer can voluntarily choose to opt onto after they go solar or after they go solar and storage. And what effectively happens in a rate switch is a customer is moving from a rate that usually has high demand charges to a rate that has lower demand charges. And in exchange, they're taking on higher dollar per kilowatt hour energy charges. Okay, so let's look at an example. This is the best way to digest this here. And there's probably no better example in my mind than the SDG&E ALTOU to DGR rate switch. Okay, so the ALTOU is the default rate for C&I customers in San Diego. So that's, if you don't have solar, that's the rate you're on if you meet those eligibility criteria. And then the DGR is the one you can choose to move to. Okay, and you can just clearly see it in the table. On the ALTOU rate, we have really, really high demand charges in the neighborhood of $26 per kW, non-coincident demand charge throughout the year. And then on top of that, we've got $30 per kW on peak demand charges summer, $20 per kW on peak demand charges winter. So this is really, really rich on the demand charge side. And then on the energy side, pretty mild, right? We're down in the 9 to 14 cent range, and there's not much differential at all there. When or if you move to the DGR rate, it just really flips on its head, right? You see what's happening. The demand charges go way down, and in exchange, the energy charges, the dollar per kilowatt hour volumetric energy charges go way up. And you can see those deltas on those energy charges get really wide, right? So that's kind of mechanically what's happening behind the scenes in a rate switch. And I would say for the most part, this is pretty indicative of the other rate switches, in SCE and in PG&E. Maybe not quite as sharp as this one here, but that's the general idea behind this. Okay, so now let's interpret what happens to savings in the event of a rate switch. So we're sticking with just the ALTOU to DGR. Here are the 10 runs we did for 10 different load profiles. You can see in all cases here, the customer saves more money by rate switching, quite a bit more, on average 23% more. And obviously that translates into a better IRR for the project, right? Okay, so that's just, again, trying to conceptualize like what happens. Now this is kind of, zooming back out. Okay, well, what happens in the event of a rate switch on average across all of those rates we had in our study, right? And this is this chart here. There's a lot of data behind the scenes in this chart here, and we're obviously just looking at averages. And you can see we're making a pretty big statement on the top of this slide here. And I can tell you, I have stress tested this one very extensively. And what we're saying here is, in almost all cases, you can say the vast majority of the time, however you want to phrase it, but almost always it makes sense to rate switch. Okay. And there are cases where it doesn't. It probably makes sense to just really quickly mention some of those edge cases are when the solar system is small relative to customer load, right? Say customer has, I don't know, 1,000 kW max demand for the year, and you're just sizing up like a 10 or a 15% offset system. A lot of those cases, it may not make sense, and you're going to want to run it. And then also, I'll just quickly mention, I'm not going to go into the weeds on this, but the B10 to B19R, you can see that's actually the one case where it doesn't on average, and that's a bit of an anomaly. I'm not going to go into the weeds on that, but it's kind of the edge case of all these other ones. Okay, let's now look at how much benefit is there on average for the solar plus storage project when you rate switch. Again, got to make a big disclaimer on this slide. Well, this is obviously going to be very dependent on how the solar and storage systems are sized relative to load, right? So don't think of this as definitive, like, oh, great, every time I rate switch ALTOU to DGR, I'm saving 25% more money. Across the runs we looked at, that's where the average shook out. But again, this one's can fluctuate quite a bit depending on how you size. One last slide in this section, and this is kind of going to be a segue to the next couple of sections, is now we want to think about this in the context of energy storage savings only. Okay, so again, in the last two slides, we're starting to conclude most of the time, vast majority of the time, it's in the customer's best interest to rate switch. So therefore, I think our assumption is, well, they're going to do it. If they can save more money by doing it, they're going to do it. And you as the developer are going to encourage them to do it. So now we're asking, well, what happens to storage savings when they switch, like just isolating storage? And the answer here is it's a mixed bag. Sometimes it goes up and sometimes it goes down, depending on the rate. So we're certainly not trying to say that if the storage savings goes down, right, maybe look at the far right, the B20 to B20 option R. This is the PG&E large rate. Okay, we're certainly not saying, okay, oh, it went down a little bit on average, therefore it's not viable. Like definitely not making that statement. In fact, being at B20 option R, if you do a solar plus storage project and they rate switch, storage is still very, very viable here, right? We're coming in at almost like $80 per kW of storage savings on average. So just want to be careful about the conclusions we're trying to draw here, but it definitely is at least interesting to think about. And certainly in the context on like the policy side, and as we're fighting and wanting advantageous rates, good price signals for energy storage, I could probably make the argument on some of these rates and these rate switches are not doing the job. For instance, the TOU 8D to E, again, if you go back a couple slides, right, the overall solar plus storage savings in economics goes up. That's a good thing. Okay, that's good for the project, but the storage component is getting squeezed. We don't like that. We don't think that's equitable because we want storage to be able to capture value that we think it deserves. So there is some inequities here. That's probably a conversation for another webinar, but that's kind of how I think to interpret some of these. Okay, let's now, we're sticking with this theme of just looking at storage savings, okay? And we're gonna start breaking out, well, how does energy storage reduce utility bills and capture value in this next section? And just kind of the quick level set here, I think everybody on the call already knows this. In California, in a C&I app behind the meter application, storage basically can reduce the utility bill in one of two ways, right? It's either demand savings, and that's through like demand charge management or peak shaving peaks, reducing demand charges. So that's what we're kind of referring to as demand savings. Then the other one is energy savings, which is time use arbitrage. On a time use arbitrage rate, charging when it's cheap, discharging back when the rate is more expensive. Okay, so there's some really interesting, I think, charts here and takeaways. When a customer rate switches, a solar plus storage customer rate switches, it significantly changes how storage captures value and reduces the bill. You can see on the left, in a no rate switch scenario, we're talking it's like 80-20 in terms of the savings, the storage savings coming from demand. When they switch, it flips. And more savings on average across all runs, and we're going to dig in here in a second and kind of break out the variance, but on average it's more like 2/3 of the savings of the reduction of the utility bill is coming from energy charges, 1/3 is coming from demand charges. So let's unpack this further. Again, here's the no rate switch scenario. Again, on average 80-20. There's variance depending on the rate. I think this chart's really cool. This is pretty neat. This is all of the individual runs we did plotted. So it kind of is interesting, if nothing else, to look at like variance across different rates, because where storage savings comes from, is determined, of course, by how that specific rate tariff is set up, and that's the average. So now let's go to, of course, this is the next slide, and again, I said it earlier, when a customer rate switches, where the storage savings come from flips. On average, like 64-36 energy now. A lot of variance here, right? Much more so than the earlier slide. I would argue that this is the more important slide. This, I think, is a really important slide because, again, going back to our last section, we're basically saying we think it almost always makes sense to rate switch outside of edge cases. So therefore, we should be focusing on, well, what happens when you rate switch? Because that's what's going to be happening, right? And I would think that, even for me, there was definitely, I think I was a bit surprised to see this. And, I've presented this to our team internally because I think there's a probably general conception out there that a lot of people think, commercial storage is mostly about demand charge management. That's where you make the money. And it turns out that's not the case with these rate switch dynamics. And California, reminder, I think folks know this, it is far and away the biggest behind the meter C&I storage market in the country by a wide margin. And turns out, on average, across different rates, more of the savings is coming from energy. Again, I probably wouldn't focus too much on the averages here. I'd be looking more specifically at like the individual rates. It can be as strong as 80-20, or it can be more like 50-50. Definitely an interesting slide. Let's just do a really quick illustration to kind of unpack that further. I just bring this back up because we already digested this, right? The ALTOU, high demand charges, low energy charges versus DGR. It flips, lower demand charges, higher energy charges, and also big differentials between those on and off peak energy charges. Here are the ALTOU to DGR runs, right, to illustrate kind of that earlier slide. These are the runs that went into making up the average. Again, it skews very heavy on demand savings if you stayed on ALTOU, but if and when you move to DGR, it really flips. And this was the most extreme of the flips, right? We went from like 90-10 demand to like 80-20 energy. Really pretty interesting. Okay, this is the last section. I know I'm dumping a ton of information on you here. Hopefully you're staying with me. And now we're going to talk about how or what the impact of the load profile is, or how much impact it can have on savings. Okay, so before we interpret those results, I thought it'd be kind of cool to start with a quick visual here and show the two extreme cases from our data set, the church and the data center. These charts are pulled from the ETB Analytics Visualizer tool. I bet you some folks recognize these. Another side note here, the fact that I'm calling it a church and a data center, which is what it was, is kind of less important. I would really encourage you to be focusing and thinking about this through like load factor, right? Because that number there kind of, again, sums up how volatile / peaky it is, or how steady a load, right? So for instance, like a data center could have been whatever, a cold storage facility that also happens to have a very high load factor, meaning very little variance in the peak versus the average. Okay, so let's start interpreting some results. This is kind of neat. We actually looked at this slide earlier when we looked at like, what is the total solar plus storage savings by rate schedule? That was the blue line. Now we're just overlaying the variance on top of this. And this is kind of like the individual runs. So you can kind of see here, depending on rate, there's different amounts of variance. Some there's a lot, others there's not so much. The punchline of this slide, the title, well, it can have a meaningful impact on solar plus storage capture based on the type of load profile and the load factor. Excuse me. This is kind of a neat chart. Here we're plotting the actual 10 sites we ran. And it's, again, like it might have been more appropriate to like list the load factor instead of the actual site, but you get the idea, especially for the medium and large category rates. You can see there, it's the church every time. It's the volatile customer, the volatile load that offers the best savings opportunity. And it really just kind of makes sense because it's, you're able to save more from demand charges and demand reduction with a spiky customer. Back to this slide here. I think, there you go, my screen just caught up, right? Say you have two customers that look like this, they have the same max annual demand. You can do a lot of damage if you got a battery on the church with demand management. You can really shave those peaks and capture demand savings versus the data center. It doesn't matter if the data center is on a really high demand charge rate, like the SDG&E ALTOU. The reality is you just can't really efficiently shave peaks here. So that's kind of the why for the medium and large schedules, the spiky, the low load factor customers offer the better savings opportunity. The flat or high load factor customers offer the not as good. Okay, last chart in this section showing PV plus ESS savings in the left, and also ESS only savings in the right there, plotted against load factor. Same point I just made. Takeaway here is, hey, look, on average, all other things equal, the peakier customer, the more volatile customer, the better savings opportunity. And that's true for both solar plus storage and also storage only. So maybe if I'm a developer, and the takeaway for me here is, ideally, it's good when you see more volatile customers. And maybe as you're qualifying lots of projects coming in, those are the ones to target and prioritize up, all other things equal. Okay, I know this was a ton to digest. I want to do a quick summary of kind of key points out of those. As Tracy mentioned at the beginning, this is our first masterclass, so this is like, graduate level stuff. It's kind of fun to run this analysis and peer review it with our team because, just lets us go really deep. A lot of the content we publish is like 101 level. This stuff is much deeper than that. So let me just do a really quick rundown on key takeaways. Overall, solar plus storage economics in California are strong. Excuse me. On average, those IRRs ranged earlier anywhere from like 9 to 20%. A lot of variance between rates. The slide did show, again, big asterisk, highly dependent on the relative solar and storage system size to one another. But it's generally directionally accurate to say in most cases, most of the savings is coming from solar. And in terms of like, well, what is the marginal savings opportunity from adding storage? We saw a lot of variance depending on the rate there. This was one of the bigger, and I want to be careful here. We're definitely not saying always, but most of the time we ran this and tested this hypothesis pretty hard. And I would love to kind of one-on-one with anybody who wants to kind of like challenge this, which is good. I mean, that's what we want. And we want to kind of think about, are there cases we're not thinking about? But by and large, for C&I customers in California that are doing solar plus storage, they're going to be rate switching because it's better for savings and it's better for economics. Again, we saw this concept in terms of what then happens to the storage savings. It flips, and energy and time of use arbitrage becomes much more important. And then that last slide there, I think maybe a takeaway is, hey, look, the load profile can meaningfully influence how much savings you can capture from solar and storage. Or if you're just isolating to try to look at like how much can storage save, and generally speaking, the peakier, lower load factor customers are going to offer you better savings opportunities there. One more slide. So, sheesh, we've spent a lot of time on this. We did some review of this internally with our team, and honestly, it's led to so many more questions and like more things like, did you think about that? Or and there's just frankly a list of things like we need to do next. I bet you anything, Tracy, we've already got questions coming in on this one here, which is people. This is probably the biggest shortcoming of this analysis, which is these do not include the new quote unquote storage friendly rates or the daily demand charge rates. The good news is these are coming very soon to the ETB developer platform in our next update, which we're internally calling the V4 update. I think Tracy's going to talk about this in a minute and the timelines here, but we're going to have the ability to model these. We're also going to have the ability to model real-time pricing. So we're going to have to rerun this again. The big question I'm going to be wondering is, we know for certain these rates are going to offer us more savings from storage, right? Like that blue versus orange chart, yeah, we're going to get more from storage, but the big question in my mind is, what does it do to the overall pie? Are these going to be better for the solar plus storage project compared to the solar friendly rate switch options? Big question to follow up answer. Hopefully we'll be publishing something on that in the near future. I actually think we had this in the teaser and the promotion. We talked a lot about how to optimally size. I don't have anything definitive for you here. In fact, I've been trying to over the last couple of months, like come up with some rules and best practices here, but it's so dependent on the rate switch, the load profile, and we're going to have smarter people than me at Energy Toolbase that are already thinking about this and working on this, and we will kind of come up with a co-optimization algorithm to really optimize the solar and the storage system size for the opportunity, right? Based on their load profile, based on their rate tariff. Standalone ESS, this is probably another one separately. Knock on wood for all of us that we get a standalone energy storage tax credit, because that's the missing link here, even though there's probably some really strong cases today, right? That the spiky customer on a high demand charge rate like ALTOU, those are going to be very, very viable for storage only, we think. But obviously, it would help a lot if we had a tax credit for those. This is a big one to summarize quick. NEM3 coming soon. I'm sure a lot of folks are tracking this closely. This is my opportunity to give a quick and big plug for CALSA, California Solar and Storage Association. I hope most everyone on this call is already a member. If you're not, you definitely need to be, and let us know. We can get you in contact with Carter over there, the membership director. But CALSA is just killing it in terms of like the intel and insights around the big NEM3 proceeding that's underway. Brad's obviously been publishing and hosting webinars on that. And then also even beyond that, as we think about like having good rate tariffs that offer up good price signals to capture value with storage. There's a lot of work to be done there, and we've all got to kind of like work together as an industry to fight for good outcomes here. I believe that. So big plug for CalSA. And then the last one, I mentioned this earlier, but you know, remember we're just thinking about the value that storage provides through bill savings. And there are obviously lots of other very, very valuable things that storage provides. Obviously the resiliency, the microgrids, the backup element, grid services revenue streams. That's not looked at in this analysis. It's a big part of the equation, and we're going to need to look at that more in the future. Tracy, I'm going to pass it back to you for, I think, a couple follow-up slides, and then we'll go to Q&A.
All right, sounds good. Yeah, we do have quite a bit of questions. Adam, do you want me to take control of the screen for the PowerPoint?
Yes, indeed.
Okay, let me do that. All right, hold on one second. Let me share my screen. All right, Adam, let me know if you can see it.
We can see it. Maybe go to, there you go. Presenter mode, we're good to go.
Awesome. Okay, so can you still see it there? We're good?
We're good.
Awesome. So yeah, before we get into Q&A, we do have a lot of questions. A lot of these we unfortunately aren't going to get to, but please follow up with us after the webinar. But I did want to touch quickly on Energy Toolbase and kind of what we do. Like Adam mentioned, the analysis was run entirely on our ETB developer platform, which is used by a lot of people on this webinar already to run their solar and storage financial analysis. And people have been using this for years. We do have a really exciting, long-awaited update coming in just a few weeks to our platform that we know you guys are going to be really excited about. We are excited about. So be on the lookout for announcements. In addition to our modeling platform, we do have our Acumen EMS product, which is our intelligent energy storage management control software. We're excited to be able to offer our controls product to you guys, and our controls engineering team and data scientists work really hard on this product every day to continue to make it even better. And we also do have our ETB monitor platform that provides you the real-time insights into your projects and how they're performing. So our product suite is really just designed to take your products from conception to end of life, starting with this analysis like we just ran. So if you want to talk to us more about our controls or our platform, don't hesitate to reach out to our team. We're happy to talk about it. And now let's get into some Q&A. A lot of questions. Again, a big one, will this recording be available? Yes, we are going to send the recording and this entire slide deck out to everybody who registered after the webinar, so please be patient. Hopefully we'll get it out within an hour of it ending. Another question we had was why we only ran solar and storage for this analysis.
Awesome. Tracy, do me a favor, go to the last slide in the appendix. I couldn't figure out a place to fit this in. This is a really valuable slide. Oh, no, second to last slide.
Yep.
Thank you. We did a data scrape last week of the SCHIP database. This is all public, as folks know. It is a required field to say whether that SCHIP reservation was paired with solar or not. And as you can see right here, for the non-resi SCHIP reservations over the last, I think this data set was 4 or 5 years, it's 80% of the time we're paired with solar. So most cases, that's what's happening today in the market. Again, I think if our industry gets a standalone energy storage tax credit, this could change. And again, would love to rerun this analysis for standalone storage, but that was kind of the reason why, what's happening in the market today, and 8 out of 10 projects today are paired. So that's kind of that.
Awesome. Let me go back to that Q&A slide. Okay. So another question we had, I saw a lot of people ask, what's the PV and ESS size ratio on the models? We had quite a few people ask that.
Great question. I wanted to be really clear about that. In the long form deck that we publish, we will kind of really more transparently break down how that was run. On average, across all runs, and with a lot of variance, the PV capacity was approximately 2x the storage PV capacity. So the PV was bigger. The way we arrived at sizing, what we did when we kind of elected which sizes to run is we chose the optimal energy storage system size rounded to the nearest 100 kW of capacity. That's a mouthful, but so you have a load profile for an individual run, you size up the solar, like in a lot of these cases we'll run at 70% offset. And then in terms of determining what size storage system to run, we ran an optimization and we said, what's the best storage system size rounded to the nearest 100? So we'll document that more in the long form version. Really important question, but call it roughly 2 to 1 with variance.
Okay, another one, somebody asked, can you explain, this was, a lot of questions were on specific slides. So on slide 6, but in general, can you explain what storage control settings that you use, peak demand shaving, energy arbitrage, etc.?
I figured that might come up. We actually purposefully decided to not show those. I would tell you again, I did make the comment that it is very similar to all of the integrations on how they're set up and run today. I want to take that one back internally where there's a little bit of sensitive info there. Maybe we can kind of share like the range of where that got ran, but I can tell you, I guess the way to think about it is this: as you're in ETB developer running simulations, you would be getting the same results that we're showing throughout this analysis if you're using, again, the Acumen EMS or the third-party integrations, Tesla and STEM and others. So maybe in the long form version, Tracy, we can give more visibility there without giving exact numbers.
Sounds good. Another one, I had a couple people ask, does ETB offer an easy way to optimize the best rate for a given scenario, or is there a quick way to do that analysis in Energy Tool based on whether to rate switch?
Yeah, we've been getting that question for at least 5 or 6 years. Can you tell us, Energy Tool Base, you guys are really smart, you have all the data, can you tell us the best rate to rate switch to? An important point for commercial, don't forget, usually you only have one option to move to, right? That's why I kind of talked about rate pairs. In residential settings, sometimes, like I'm in Southern California, Edison, I think I have like 3 or 4 options I can elect to move to. For commercial, it's usually like you have one. I guess that statement is maybe not entirely true as I say it out loud with the new storage friendly rates coming online, because now you're going to have to say, hey, does it make sense for me to move my solar plus storage project to the solar friendly rate or the storage friendly rate? This analysis was all run based on, the one other option you have. It's been talked about. That feature is on the board. It's on the request list. But right now, I think that was really the purpose of this deck and those slides, to say, hey, look, this is the one to move to. And maybe we can even develop a cheat sheet, Tracy, but I don't think we're going to have any time real soon on the platform.
Yeah, we did have a couple people asking about like a cheat sheet on that. So that is a good idea. Let's see. There's a lot in here. I'm trying to go through them. I know we're getting to the top of the hour, so we'll do.
I want to take one on this NEM3. I see it come in.
Yeah, we did have a couple.
Yeah, it's man, this is a big thing to think on. I would say this. We're CalSA is the expert there. Brad, we're kind of getting all of our intel on how NEM3 is going to shake out. There's still certainly uncertainty there. It seems like, and I will say, I'm kind of following along pretty closely, and on some of the subcommittee calls for like the NEM3 team at CalSA. The early indications are not looking very good, is maybe my read of it. It seems like where the recent like scoping proposed decision is at, it seems like solar may not get a great outcome in NEM3. And that could mean a lot of different things. And I think that's very much to be determined. So maybe that is, not great for solar, which is like an opportunity for storage. There's all this discussion of like the glide path, and like there'll likely be a transition. It won't just kind of go into effect immediately. The other comment here, which I've been thinking about, and I had a conversation with Brad Hevner at CalSA on, it's very unclear how NEM3 affects commercial. I think so much of the discussion right now is focused on the resi implications. Commercial is kind of an afterthought, it feels like. So not entirely clear, but if anything, like maybe like it probably erodes the solar, savings opportunity and creates a storage opportunity. It's kind of the best we know now.
Cool. Adam, do you see any in here if you are looking, any, oh, sorry, I'm changing the slides.
I think, Tracy, you said it. We're at the hour. I really wanted to cap it. I think I've probably got my work cut out for me. We'll respond to
Yeah.
everybody, but I think it may, unless you see a really, there's
Yeah,
just so many to sift through
I mean,
here.
there's a lot, yeah. And like I said in the beginning, we're not going to get to all of them, but if you are an ETB developer user, please reach out to your account manager. They can definitely help you run through some of these scenarios, or you can reach out to Adam or myself on that follow-up email that I'm going to send out shortly. And that's going to contain, again, the recording and the summary of today's slide deck and some helpful links. And we're going to make the full analysis deck available to you guys. Like I said, we are putting the finishing touches on it, and you guys will get it when we have it. So again, if you're not a ETB developer user, please sign up for a free trial. We'll have the link in the follow-up email, or you can just go to our website and sign up. With that trial, you'll have an account manager, full access to the platform, and your account manager will be happy to walk through any scenarios or questions that you have. And we do have some exciting updates coming to that platform that you guys are really going to like. And last announcement, our utility rates team is hosting a webinar in 2 weeks on February 18th on the new PG&E B rates that are going to go into effect in March. And our team is going to be diving into those rates, what it means for existing and new customers, explaining the changes you'll see and the grandfathering protections, and we'll be reviewing some case studies as well. So sign up on our website. I'll put the link in that email, that follow-up email as well. That's all we have today. So thank you guys again for being on, and thanks, Adam, for all your awesome insights. Please reach out with any questions.
Thank you, Tracy. Thank you, everyone.